Today's talk is on going beyond Buddha. Barefooted and naked of breast, I mingle with the people of the world. My clothes are ragged and dust-laden, and I am ever blissful. I use no magic to extend my life. Now, before me, the dead trees become alive. The subject, as I said, of today's talk is Dogen's fascicle, Going Beyond Buddha. This is not something I came up with on my own. It was assigned to me by the Roshi, who has established a method of instruction that involves giving me homework that is way over my head. We'll be working today with two translations, one by the Venerable Kaz Tanahashi from his 2013 book, Treasury of the True Dharma I, Zen Master Dogen's Shobogenzo, and one published recently in an 8-volume set by the Soto Zen Text Project based at Stanford University. The latter comes with extensive footnotes. I will also be drawing on Dharma talks by Taigen Dan Layton of Ancient Dragon Zen Gate in Chicago and White Lotus Judith Rager of Clouds in the Water Zen Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. The opening verse was a poem by 12th century Chan master Kakuan, written as a commentary accompanying his drawing of the 10th in the series of 10 ox-herding pictures that became famous in Japan several centuries later. The poems were translated by Senzaki Nyogen and Paul Reps in the 1930s and compiled by Reps in the book Zen Flesh, Zen Bones. Before we can begin to understand what Dogen means by going beyond Buddha, we need to be clear about what we mean or think we mean by Buddha. One classic teaching is that there are three concepts or layers of Buddha. There is the historic Shakyamuni Buddha, a prince who became a monk and lived and taught in present-day Nepal and India 500 years before the Christian era. There is the Buddha seed that lives within all beings, our potential for awakening to the enlightenment that is already within us. And there is omniscient Buddha nature, the teaching that everything, sentient beings and non-sentient, is working together in a miraculous, ineffable expression of the universe, what Buddhists call dependent co-arising, meaning that nothing exists in isolation and everything arises from an interdependent web of causes and conditions. So how can we go beyond this, and why would we want to? Dogen is not all that encouraging. He wrote, "You should know someone going beyond Buddha cannot be fully realized merely by practice and enlightenment through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 eons, or 100 great eons. Only those who study the inconceivable road can realize it." Later in the text he writes, "Knowing, practicing, and realizing the key to the barrier of going beyond is not something ordinary people can accomplish." Alrighty then. Let's all hang out down at the Losers Lounge. Nevertheless, my assignment is to help us, beginning with me, understand how this ancient teaching can inform and inspire us in our practice and our everyday lives. The concept of going beyond ordinary consciousness or understanding of life is, of course, a central theme in Zen. The final lines of the Heart Sutra, Gate, Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate, Bodhisvaha, can be translated as gone, gone, all the way over, everyone gone to the other shore. In that spirit, I would like to start by sharing with you a couple of my early going beyond experiences, what Zen practitioners call kensho, which translates as seeing into one's nature. The first one is something I don't think I've ever talked about in front of the Sangha. It involves an experience I had many years ago on LSD, after which I never took LSD again. As Ram Dass liked to say, when you get the message, hang up the phone. And as I later learned, there are other ways to get the message. I graduated from college in Southern California in the summer of 1974 and moved to Portland, Oregon shortly thereafter. A few months after I arrived, a new acquaintance gave me some LSD. I had taken psychedelics a few times before and had both good and bad experiences, but this stuff was way more powerful than anything I'd done previously. I was with the only two people in town I knew well, and they seemed to be acting very strangely. While lying under a freeway overpass in a mud puddle, listening to the rhythm of the cars whizzing above, my loneliness at moving to a new city where I knew almost no one, and my doubts and fears about where my young life was headed overtook me. For 3 days, I could not sleep. I felt like I had lost the lifeline of who I was before. I dissolved into a tiny dot of negative consciousness, adrift in a vast ocean of meaninglessness. I eventually came down, but the deep depression stayed with me. A couple of months later, in the early spring of 1975, I and a couple of friends visiting from California drove out to Bagby Hot Springs, a remote destination in the Mount Hood National Forest favored by hikers and hippies. Guess what? We had only taken half of the acid the first time. So here we go, back on the horse. Wasn't long before the panic returned, and I felt myself being sucked down into the whirlpool of negativity. I had been reading Carlos Castaneda, and sitting naked in the hot tub, I began chanting Don Juan's mantra, "Don't indulge, don't indulge." For a couple of hours, my psyche was in a pitched battle with itself, and then unexpectedly, amazingly, I popped out the top of the sinkhole. For the rest of the day, I was completely at one with my surroundings, no separation from the elements. The steaming hot water, the crisp cold air, the majestic green trees, the clear blue sky, the blindingly white snow, and my crazy friends and I running barefoot over the snow and basking naked in the sun. There was nothing to fear. We all belonged. I had taken 3 comparative religion classes in college, and I had read enough about Buddhism, including Zen flesh, Zen bones, to appreciate what I was experiencing, what Buddhists call non-duality, and it freed me from my depression, at least for a time. The power of that day is with me still. However, it was another 20 years before I learned to practice in a way that enabled me to begin to integrate the profound experience of non-duality into my daily life. The next breakthrough story I'm going to tell might be familiar to some of you. A couple of you may have even been there when it happened. It is, I think, more of a bona fide Kensho experience because it was the fruit of beginner's mind Zen practice. In 1996, I found my way to the Houston Zen community. On our early retreats with Tenshin Roshi Reb Anderson at the Margaret Austin Center, we used to leave the back doors open in the summertime. Wasps would fly in and then bang into the big windows trying to get out. I remember keeping an eye on them while sitting on my cushion, staring out the window. Isn't that a metaphor for the human condition, I thought. The doors are wide open. On the other side of this glass is a beautiful meadow, representing liberation from suffering, while I sit here trapped inside my head, suffering in silence. I can picture it, imagine what it might feel like, but I can't get there from here. The glass is impermeable. Around this time, a few of us began weekday morning sitting at what we called pocket zendos. I sat almost every day for a year. Nothing special happened on any given day, though imperceptibly to me, I was changing. A year later, I am back in the zendo with the wasps at the Margaret Austin Center, looking out the same window as the sun comes up over the meadow. After a couple of days on the retreat schedule, I suddenly realized the metaphorical glass barrier was gone. What I had thought was something out there, to be attained at some future time if ever, was in here, right now. It was a tremendously liberating awakening, immediately accompanied by a tremendous sense of responsibility. I realized I could no longer cut myself continuous slack for acting like a jerk because I was not, quote unquote, enlightened. All my ancient twisted karma I now fully avow. Later that day, I was sitting on my cushion listening to Reb's Dharma talk. Someone asked him what enlightenment looks like. I must have had a blissed out smile on my face because he pointed at me and said, enlightenment could look like that. A Dharma brother immediately said, quick, take a picture before it's gone. True enough, it didn't last. But now I had a practice and a sangha to help me process and incorporate this insight into my ordinary mind, and it has stayed with me all these years. To be clear, these kinds of Kensho experiences are not, at least I don't think, what Dogen is referring to when he talks about going beyond Buddha. They are more like sighting Buddha mind and entering Buddha mind. They could be compared to the third and fourth of the ox-herding pictures, perceiving the bull and catching the bull, meaningful breakthroughs that can serve as landmarks on the path of practice, but which are not essential and certainly are not the ultimate objective. Kakuan writes, when one hears the voice, one can sense its source. As soon as the six senses merge, the gate is entered. Wherever one enters, one sees the head of the bull. The unity is like salt in water, like color in dye stuff. The slightest thing is not apart from self. Not long after my encounter with the wasps, along with several other Houston students, I asked Tenshin Roshi to be my teacher. He in turn facilitated the arrival of Galen Roshi to be our resident priest, now the abbot, and she became my teacher as well. And the Margaret Austin Center is now known as the Auspicious Cloud Retreat Center. Dogen Zenzi credits Dongshan, a 9th century Chinese Chan master and the founder of the Kao Dong school, which became known as Soto Zen in Japan, with originating the term going beyond Buddha. At the beginning of the fascicle, Dongshan addresses the assembly. Concerning realization through the body of going beyond Buddha, I would like to talk a little. A monk said, what is this talk? Dongshan said, when I talk, you don't hear it. The monk said, do you hear it? Dongshan said, wait till I don't talk, then you hear it. Got that? We can always count on Dogen to clear things up. He continues, the words spoken here, going beyond Buddha, originally came from Dongshan. Other Buddha ancestors have studied his words and realized through the body going beyond Buddha. Know that going beyond Buddha is neither causality nor fruition. However, there is realization through the body and complete attainment of you don't hear it at the moment when I talk. In the footnotes for the Soto Zen project translation, it is written of the exchange between Dongshan and the monk. The point would seem to be that talking and what's beyond Buddha are not two separate concepts. Would seem to be? If the most learned scholars at Stanford aren't sure what it means, who am I to venture a guess? Fortunately, Dogen addresses the fundamental point more directly later in the fascicle. Going beyond Buddha means that you teach Buddha, means that you reach Buddha, and going further, you continue to see Buddha. It is not the same as sentient beings seeing Buddha. Therefore, if your seeing Buddha is merely the same as sentient beings seeing Buddha, it is not seeing Buddha. It is seeing Buddha mistakenly. How can you experience going beyond Buddha? Okay, now I'm going to venture a guess. What Dogen is telling us is that going beyond Buddha requires going beyond all our preconceived ideas about what is Buddha. The historical Shakyamuni, the Buddha that lives within all beings, and the omniscient Buddha nature. And when a new understanding arises, we need to go beyond that as well, and on into infinity. Ultimate reality is inconceivable to the human mind. Buddha is not our idea of what Buddha is. As we chant in the Song of the Precious Mere Samadhi, just to portray it in literary form is to stain it with defilement. which is sort of like what I'm doing here. This warning about trying to describe the absolute in relative terms is not unique to Buddhism. It is why depictions of the Prophet Muhammad are prohibited in Islam, and why there is a tradition of not writing or saying the name of God in Orthodox Judaism. This is also the source of the saying or koan, "If you meet the Buddha in the road, kill him." Dogen refers to this saying in the fascicle in recounting Chan Master Kumu of Jingyin, describing one who is incapable of Buddhahood. When he meets a Buddha, he kills a Buddha. When he meets an ancestor, he kills the ancestor. By my limited understanding, I think the relevance to us is that in order to meet the Buddha in the present moment, we must discard our ideas of what the Buddha is, and for that matter, who we are, what the road is, and what the present moment is, and take the leap of faith off the 100-foot pole. As Zen priest White Lotus Judith Rager observes, the old Zen masters used the word kill, contradicting the first precept. That they did that is an indication of how important the concept of going beyond was to them. I should mention that If You Meet the Buddha in the Road, Kill Him is also the title of a book written by a psychotherapist in 1972 in the heat of the countercultural infatuation with non-Western religions. It has been on my shelf for 50 years. It was of no use in preparing this talk. Early Chinese versions of the ox-herding panels had 5 or 6 pictures, ending with a white circle representing absolute emptiness, personal liberation from cause and effect. Kakuan's 12th century version suggested a deeper Mahayana understanding. There are now 10 panels. The 6th panel is titled Riding the Bull Home. The 7th is The Bull Transcended, with the bull symbolizing the wild mind or ego on one level and the eternal principle of life on another. The 8th panel, both bull and self transcended, features the empty circle. Kakuan's poem reads, "Whip, rope, person, and ox all merge into no thing. This heaven is so vast, no message can stain it. How may a snowflake exist in a raging fire? Here are the footprints of the ancestors." This is from Zen Flesh, Zen Bones. Believe it or not, I've had this book for since 1972. It actually fell apart on this trip. But the part that I wanted to show you, the pictures, this is what the Zen circle looks like in Kakuan's drawing. Hang on. But it does not end here. There are 2 more panels, Reaching the Source and Return to Society, quoted at the beginning of this talk. Here is the rest of Kakuan's commentary on Return to Society. Inside my gate, sorry, 1,000 sages do not know me. The beauty of my garden is invisible. Why should one search for the footprints of the patriarchs? I go to the marketplace with my wine bottle and return home with my staff. I visit the wine shop and the market, and everyone I look upon becomes enlightened. Speaking from the perspective of someone who's not sure he's ever left the marketplace, I approve this message. Although the Zen ancestors were adamant on the necessity of going beyond, there is a seemingly paradoxical narrative in the teachings in which we don't need to go anywhere. In a Dharma talk from 2004 titled "The Clarity Beyond Clarity of Active Buddhas," Taigen Dan Leighton recounted the koan in which Joshu asks Nansen, "What is the way?" Nansen replies, "Ordinary mind is the way." So then Joshu asks, "How do I get there?" Nansen says, "Sorry, but the more you try to approach it, the further away you get." At this point, Taigen comments, "So all these sayings from Dogen about clarity beyond clarity and fully experiencing the vital process on the path of going beyond Buddha are not about helping you figure out how to get somewhere." But Joshu was not satisfied with this answer. "If trying to get there gets us further away from it, how do I know if this is the way or not?" Nansen answers, "It is not a matter of knowing or not knowing. Knowing is just a delusion, but not knowing is just a vacancy. When you reach the true way, beyond doubt, it is vast and open as all of space." Ordinary mind, going beyond. Samsara and enlightenment. Not two, not one. As Shohaku Okamura, a Japanese Zen teacher who has lived in the United States for most of the past 50 years, puts it, our practice is to express eternity through our impermanent body and mind. I was up early this morning looking at our library, and I came upon this book, Realizing Genjo Koan, the Key to Dogen's Shobo Genzo, by Shohaku Okamura. And I'd like to read just a short segment from it. "True realization," Dogen wrote, "goes beyond seeing the unity of things." The sentence, "When the Dharma fills the body and mind, one thinks something is still lacking," means that when truly filled by Dharma, we see the incompleteness of our practice and perceive that the characteristics of all things are subtle, complex, and innumerable. We then understand that we must inquire endlessly into the nature of all things, and as bodhisattvas, we must perpetually explore the proper way to sincerely practice with all beings. We see that the moon has an infinite height and that our lives as individuals have infinite depth. Yet we also realize that as individuals, what we can see is limited. No matter how deep, how high, or how broadly we focus our vision, our view will always be limited. To see this limit is wisdom. Since we are finite, limited human beings, we cannot see the entirety of reality as it truly is. We are born, live, and die within this reality, so we can only see it from the inside. Because we must take a position in reality, we cannot see the parts of it that are hidden by our own individual existence. Because of the range of our eyesight, for example, is less than 180 degrees, when we are looking forward, we cannot see what is behind us. And when we turn to see what is behind us, we cannot see what lies ahead, just as we cannot see our own backs without a mirror. Yet we do have the ability to remember things we have seen before and integrate them with what we are seeing now. In this way, we can create a mental picture representing a visual range of 360 degrees, and in a similar way, we are capable of creating a mental image of what we think is total reality. We must understand, however, that these images are simply mental representations of the world that we create within our minds. They are only constructs. I once took part in an 8-week Sangha class called Entering the Path of Practice. This was followed by another 8-week class called Extending the Path of Practice. At this point, my wife inquired, "When do you get to ending the path of practice?" For me, there is no ending the path of practice, though my definition of practice has expanded. Although it remains essential, I don't meditate as much as I used to, but I hope I am a wiser, more skillful presence in society by which I mean my family, friends, neighbors, students, readers, listeners. In case you can't tell, I really don't know what Dogen meant by going beyond Buddha. I think I may need a few thousand more eons. But I did come up with a corollary proposition. Going beyond Buddha also means going beyond the concept of going beyond Buddha, which could bring us back to ordinary mind in the marketplace, where everyone we meet becomes enlightened. I am reminded of the tale of Bird's Nest Monk, a Chinese Zen master who often meditated in a tree. The story has, I think, a simple Buddhist message that goes beyond going beyond Buddha. The story has it that one day an eminent man, the governor, paid him a visit, arriving while the Bird's Nest Monk was up in his tree. When the governor found him, he asked, "What is the teaching of Buddhism?" Bird's Nest Monk recited a verse from the Dhammapada, not to commit wrong actions, but to do all good ones, and keep the heart pure. This is the teaching of all Buddhas. When the governor heard this, he was not impressed. He said, "Any child of 3 years old knows that." The Bird's Nest Monk replied, "Any 3-year-old child may know it, but even an 80-year-old man cannot do it." So please, take heart. From the monastery to the marketplace, be good and don't hurt anybody. Do not succumb to the politics of greed, hatred, and delusion. When you reach the true way, it is vast and open. Gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisvaha.